Hey guys, a lot of people have been asking me about my bike and whether or not it's stock and everything. I will say that all of the main components that you see on this bike are 100% stock, but I have made a few modifications. And then there are some, really tiny parts that I had to change, like spark plugs and gas line and whatnot. So some people were asking me about the customizations that I had to do to get it to fit onto a beach cruiser, because these are made for mountain bikes that do not have coaster brakes. And the biggest problem was, let's see if I can get out of the sun. There you go. The biggest problem was this right here. As you can see on a coaster brake wheel, the hub is a lot thicker as a mountain bike. So the hole on this gear right here was a lot smaller. So I had to take a Dremel tool, and you can't really tell, but inside there it took me about an hour or so to take a Dremel tool and drill it out to probably another 1/4 inch or so that it would fit over the hub and then screw on tightly. The other big modification that I made was on the mount. As you can see, these, or like I said earlier, these are made for mountain bikes, which would mean that the tube right here on the mountain bike was a lot thinner. And you can see right here, this is the opening that would go over that tube, and there'd be a U-clamp holding it on. And obviously this does not fit onto this large tube. So what I originally did was I had this metal plate that came across here, as you see, and a hole in the middle of the metal plate. Move this shit out of the way. And I had a hole in the middle of the plate right here with a screw. And that screw drilled directly through this tube out the other end and just nut bolted it on. Do not do that. That was a horrible idea, because what ended up happening was there was so much vibration. It didn't have that much support, so there was so much vibration that one of the screws on my mount broke. And I will say, if you ever break anything on your bike, do not drive it or ride it until you get it fixed, because I made that mistake, and I continued to ride while one of my mounts was broken. And then one day when I tried to start it up, I cranked it really hard, and the other bolt broke. It wrenched the engine to one side and actually snapped this seat post in half. You can't really tell. Thanks to my dad, he actually welded it back for me, saying he did an awesome job, so you can't really tell. But yeah, definitely, if anything goes wrong with your bike, fix it before you ride on anymore. So after I realized that my original mount idea was a bad idea, I changed it. So again, I have this same plate that goes across. I made it much longer so that I can put holes on the outer sides of the plate. See, as you can see, this screw right here, and then this screw right here. And then I took a big U-bar, which, let me see if you can get a better view underneath these rubber blocks. It's basically just a bar, bent like a U. It's threaded on either side. And I fished some rubber, I guess it's just little rubber blocks that I found in my garage through it to help prevent a little bit of vibrations. It doesn't really help that much though, because these things vibrate like crazy, as you all know. Yeah, so I just ran that through the holes that I drilled, screwed it in really hard. The engine is obviously screwed right into the plate right there. Let's see, I'm trying to think what else I did to the mount. No, the back side of the mount is actually how it's meant to be. There were no modifications there. Here's a view of the mount from the other side. Just giving you another look. You can see it's gotten a lot of sun. Another very important change that I made was this rear wheel. This is actually a completely new wheel. I have put this engine on a very cheaply made Schwinn, bought from Walmart for $100. Very cheaply made, which is a bad idea. I'm actually going to be moving this engine to a better bike next year. But for now, that's what I'll have to do. But you do have to get a much nicer back wheel, because the one that came with the bike, within about 2 or 3 weeks, all the bearings had busted and the wheel was shot. So I got this, you know, if you just go to any nice bike shop, ask them for the sturdiest coaster brake wheel they got, they can probably hook you up with one and get the largest wires you can get as well. I meant spokes, not wires. A lot of people have been asking about fuel leaking. Yes, mine does leak a little bit, but not as much as it used to since I've made some changes. What I've done is first go ahead and throw out the fuel line that comes with the motor. That's a piece of crap. Go buy a new one. It's like $2 or so. You can get some nice ones at your local hardware store. Get some metal screw clamps to clamp them down really tightly, otherwise it will leak. And also, you can't really see, but I have this little O-ring in here that you put, I don't remember what it's called, but there's some sort of glue that you put on both sides of it, and it basically glues the fuel line to the actual tank to prevent any leakage, because otherwise, you know, they don't give you anything like that, and fuel just leaks out of there constantly without it. So if you just ask someone at the hardware store, they'll probably know what you're talking about and can help you find it. I highly recommend getting another chain, a much thicker one, stronger one. I never had any issues with the first one, but doing this just made it feel a little bit safer. And for those of you that are doing this on a mountain bike with cruiser brakes like me, this is the chain that, you know, normally comes with the regular bike. As you can see, it has stretched out a lot, and I'm going to be buying a new chain later today, actually. I definitely recommend getting a much thicker chain than this is, which is what I'm going to be doing today, because actually just last week, this chain is what controls your brakes if you're using coaster brakes. And while I was going 35 miles per hour down a hill, popped off and I didn't realize it, lost all control of my brakes, and there was nobody in front of me, and I was able to run off onto the side of the road up in some grass and stop myself before I hurt myself or anybody else. A lot of people have also been asking about their bike idling too high. This right here is your choke line, which controls the amount of idle your bike will have. Basically, you either screw it in or out and it will change your idle. Just, you have to mess around with that a little bit. Mine's actually broken, but you know, it does alright, so it doesn't really bother me. Idle's a little bit high, but that's okay. I got some really nice handlebars offline that are much wider and make it much more comfortable to hold on to and ride. You know, here's the clutch you got. Over here, some people were asking about problems with getting their throttle on. Basically, when you take this apart, there's going to be a really little notch that drops down. All you want to do is position that notch. First, position the handlebar to where you want it to sit. Mark where that notch is. Drill a little hole in the actual handlebar and then slide that notch in there when you screw this on. So that's how that works, if some of you out there were asking about that didn't know that. I also had to mess around with the muffler a little bit. As you can see, I screwed it up really bad when I first had it on. First few times I started pedaling, my pedal started nicking this and then, you know, ripped it off a little bit. So I had to take a hammer, bend that back, screw it down with a metal clamp, and then I took a rubber mallet and just hit it a bunch of times just until you get it just out of reach of the pedals. You know, that depends on which bike you're putting it on. That may or may not be a problem. Also, one day, while I was riding down the road, the tip of the muffler fell off, and I actually recommend taking that off because it sounds much more badass without it. With that on, it had a really high pitch rev. Without it, it's got kind of it's a much lower rumble, but I mean, you know, it still sounds like a motorized bike. Doesn't sound like a Harley or anything, obviously. And depending on the shape of your bike, you're gonna have to obviously make some changes to all the chain guards. You know, I had to drill an extra hole, bend it around a little bit, move it around to make it fit. That all depends on your bike. Same thing over here. I'll bend this out of the way. A few people have messaged me saying that they've set up their bike and the first time they took it up, they tried to rev it up and get it going and nothing happened. The first thing that I recommend checking is, well, obviously, I guess first check your wiring, make sure, you know, you follow the manual, get your wiring correctly. If that's all good, you might have a bad spark plug, which they sent me with 2 spark plugs. Both of them were bad. So I had to go out and get new spark plugs, and then also the female component of the spark plug is new as well, because the old one got all dried up and kept falling off, and the bike would turn off on me mid-ride. So make sure you get a nice new spark plug and the female connector. Get that back on there. So here it is, running for you. Yeah, I took the tip of the muffler off. Sounds a little bit cooler. Still high pitched, but you know, it is what it is.